The snow came early that year, swallowing the plains in a white hush that turned the town of Dalhart into a ghost of itself. Everything slowed when the wind screamed through the wooden ribs of buildings and the sky turned the color of a butcher's apron. In the dead of that December, the train from Amarillo arrived 5 hours late, dragging itself into the station like a dying animal. He was there when it came, Samuel Holt, land baron of Holt Ridge, 41 years old, leather-skinned, silver-eyed, and twice widowed. He didn't need to be in Dalhart that morning. His horses were bedded down against the storm, his ranch hands drinking whiskey by the stove, but something had stirred him out of bed. Something cold and wordless, like the dream of a fire just gone out. The girl was sitting on the bench outside the depot. No ticket in her hand, no bag beside her, just a threadbare dress and a coat too thin for the storm, soaked stiff with frost. Her knees were drawn to her chest, chin buried between them, eyes open but vacant like a calf struck dumb by lightning. He almost walked past her, but the stillness in her face caught him, something too hollow for sleep, too raw for death. "You waitin' on someone?" he asked. She didn't answer. He squatted beside her, resting one gloved hand on the iron bench. "What's your name, girl?" She whispered it, barely audible over the wind. "Willa. How long you been out here?" "I don't know." Her lips were cracked. One knuckle bled from being chewed raw. There were no stars left in the sky, just gray dust swirling in air too bitter for mercy. He took off his coat and laid it over her shoulders. She didn't flinch, but her eyes followed him now. "You got kin here?" "No," she said. "Where? Home?" "Nowhere." She was 17 at most, younger maybe. Just bones and cold skin and something deeper, like the silence of an old wound. He couldn't leave her there. He didn't ask more, just lifted her in his arms. She was light as a sack of hay and colder than anything he'd touched in years. By the time they reached the wagon, she'd passed out. He laid her beneath the blankets, wrapped her in his own coat, and didn't speak again till they reached the ridge. Holt Ridge was 50,000 acres of snow-buried pasture and black-timbered forest. It sat higher than the town, wrapped in wind and old stories. Sam had built it with cattle money and oil leases, but no sons, no daughters, no warmth to come home to. Just housemaids who didn't ask questions and ranch hands who knew not to. Willa didn't wake till morning. When she did, she was in the guest room, though it hadn't been used in years, and her throat burned when she tried to speak. A pot of stew waited on the table. Beside it, a folded note in Samuel's pen, "Eat, then we talk." She ate. She didn't run. That afternoon, he asked again. Where was she from? What had happened? She looked at the fire and said, "They burned the ranch." "My father died with it. I ran." "Who?" "The Claiborne men. They wanted the land." He said no. Sam Holt had heard the name before. The Claibornes were cattle thieves with a badge, owning half of Garza County through bribes and quiet murder. They'd gotten meaner over the years, mean enough to kill a rancher and leave his daughter for the snow. He didn't press her again that day. She stayed. At first it was silence between them, weeks of it. He'd bring her gloves or a new coat, then retreat. She'd clean dishes not asked of her, tend horses she wasn't strong enough to saddle. Slowly, they filled the silence with gestures. He taught her to shoot, and she watched how he rode. She never cried, never asked for anything, but her eyes followed him like a tether. Word got out in Dalhart that Sam Holt had taken in a girl young enough to be his daughter, that she slept in the big house. That maybe she'd been his all along. He didn't care. He'd been hated for less. One morning in March, she came to him in the stable. Her hands were still scarred, but stronger now, and her hair had grown past her shoulders. "Teach me to ride," she said. "I have," he said. "Not like that. Teach me to break a horse." So he brought her a wild one, a black colt with rage in his veins. and she fell off 5 times that day, hit her head once, spat blood onto the dirt, and got back up every time. When she finally stayed in the saddle for more than 10 seconds, Sam saw something shift in her. Not pride, not victory, something older, a memory maybe, of who she'd been before the fire. That night they didn't speak, but he sat at the table longer than usual, and she brought him coffee without being asked. Spring came, and with it the town's curiosity. She rode with him now, into Dalhart, into Amarillo, into meetings with oil men who looked at her like she was a prize mule. Sam didn't correct them. But once, outside the auction house, one rancher made a joke about Holt's new filly, loud enough for her to hear. Willa turned to the man and said, "If I were yours, I'd be dead already." The man laughed, but it was nervous. Sam looked at her like he'd never seen her before. That summer, a body was found in Garza County. One of the Claiborne men, shot through the eye, strung up by his ankles. Nothing was ever proven. But folks remembered Willa's name after that, and they said maybe Sam Holt had taken in more than a girl. Maybe he'd taken in vengeance. By the time summer waned, Willa rode like a soldier and shot like she was born to it. Sam didn't speak of what she was becoming, but he saw it in how she carried herself, in the way her hand hovered near the pistol at her hip when she stepped into a room full of men, and how she slept with her boots on, door unlatched, listening. She was not soft, not anymore, and the cold in her eyes was no longer from winter. They didn't talk about love, not in the way others did, but it seeped in around the edges, in the calloused brush of hands during saddle work. In the quiet he allowed her at breakfast, in the way she waited for his return without needing to say so. By fall, she rode beside him like a partner. Still, Sam hadn't touched her. There was a line drawn in the dust between their ages, their pasts, and something harder to name. She was 18 now, maybe 19. A woman by frontier law, but the wound that brought her here hadn't closed. He watched, he waited. Until the night she bled. It was a Sunday when they heard the shot. One, clean and deliberate, not far from the barn. Sam was cleaning his rifle. Willa had been out riding the fence line. He bolted from the house, shotgun in hand, heart in his throat. He found her kneeling beside the body of a man, blood in the dirt, her face unreadable, the Colt still smoking in her hand. "Who?" he asked. She looked at him and said, "Another Claiborne." No fear in her voice, no tremor. Sam saw the mark on the man's hand, a broken C burned into the skin. One of the younger brothers, sent to scout or scare. He'd gotten closer than he should have. Willa stood, there was blood on her jaw, not hers. "I didn't mean to shoot him in the throat," she said, wiping it off, "but I'm not sorry I did." Sam didn't bury the man. He left the body strung across a horse and sent it riding east toward Garza County. A message nailed to the saddle horn. The girl remembers. That changed everything. Dalhart spoke louder now. Preachers muttered about sin. Women crossed streets to avoid her. Men watched her longer than they ought to. She didn't flinch. Sam had trouble keeping ranch hands. Some didn't want to work for a man who kept a killer under his roof. Others didn't want to end up on her bad side. Only one stayed, an old rider named Briggs, half-deaf and half-mad, who'd served under Sam in the old cavalry days. He liked Willa. Said she reminded him of a mare he once saw trample a Comanche scout into paste. "Smart," he said, "but spooked deep. Gotta let her come to the reins on her own." Willa started wearing her father's hat. Wide-brimmed and dark as crow feathers. Folks said it made her look older, meaner. Sam thought it made her look more like herself. That winter she took to riding alone again. Sam let her. One night she didn't come back till past midnight. Her coat was torn and blood dripped from her sleeve. He met her at the stable. "What happened?" he asked. She looked up at him, eyes sharp under the brim. "They've been watching us, 4 of them. I left one behind. The others will tell Claiborne what I did." He stepped forward, touched her arm where it bled. She didn't pull away. "I'm not gonna stop," she said. "I'm not asking you to." That night, he poured her a shot of his oldest bourbon. She drank it without blinking. They didn't speak of love, still didn't, but when she stood to leave, he stopped her, touched her cheek. "Stay here tonight." She didn't ask what he meant. She just stayed. The first time they kissed, it was slow, not sweet, not soft, like touching a scar to make sure it healed. Their bodies came together in the silence between old griefs. And when they laid down, it wasn't passion that drove it, it was something hungrier. A claim staked in skin, a vow not spoken but carved. Afterward, she lay with her back to him, breathing steady, eyes open. He didn't ask what she was thinking. He knew the war she was building had no place for romance, but she let him hold her till morning. That was enough. By spring, Claiborne put up bounties, first quiet ones, then open. 500 for the girl. 1,000 for Holt. Willa didn't hide. She rode with her gun belt slung low, hair braided like a war widow, and a sawed-off rifle across her saddle. Men came, hired guns, drifters, bounty hunters. None of them left the ridge alive. One night she stood over the body of a man who tried to poison their well. She looked down at him like he was nothing but dust and spit. "I'm going to burn them all," she said. "Every last Claiborne." Sam believed her. One morning a letter came, from Amarillo, stamped with the county seal. It was from Judge Harlan, who owed Sam favors and fear both. The letter read, "Claiborne, been granted legal dominion over the eastern stretch. Says you're harboring a fugitive girl. He's calling for a court order, wants you both brought in." Willa read it over his shoulder. She smiled, slow, cruel. "Then it's time I stopped waiting. You want to go to Amarillo. I want to make them choke on their own words." Sam didn't try to stop her. He saddled his best horse, loaded his rifle, and rode beside her into the fire she'd been walking toward since the day he found her half frozen on that bench. The road to Amarillo was long and windswept, a trail of dust and intent. Sam and Willa rode together, not as fugitive and guardian, not as outlaw and lover, but as something sharper. Like storm fronts bearing down on open country. They didn't speak much on the journey, though she watched the sky the way soldiers watch the hills. Like she expected a bullet from the clouds. They arrived before dusk, their horses lathered but steady. Amarillo had grown since Sam last rode through it. New rail lines, saloons, and a courthouse with a clock tower that ticked like a death watch beetle. The plan wasn't spoken, but both knew it. They would walk in quiet, they would leave loud. Judge Harlan sat heavy behind his desk, thick hands steepled, lips chapped with corruption. He wore his robe open like a badge, his pistol closer than his gavel. A man like him didn't stay alive in Amarillo without knowing how to shoot or bribe his way through sunrise. "You come to answer the summons?" he asked, looking at Sam. Then at Willa, longer than necessary, or to stir up what's already done. Willa didn't blink. "I came to tell the truth. Truth's just a story that lasts long enough to be printed." Sam stepped forward. "You owe me, Harlan. I've paid what I could. But this girl's got Claiborne looking for blood. He's greased half the state house. They're talking about raising a marshal unit." "She's under my name," Sam said. "My roof." "That don't make her clean." The judge's voice dropped. "Word is she's killed 4 already. Shot the last one through the mouth while he was begging." Willa leaned forward. He wasn't begging, he was laughing. There was silence, a heavy, sick thing. The judge's eyes shifted, his lip twitched. "I can't protect you forever," he said. "Sooner or later, someone's gonna come down on Holt Ridge. Real law, not backwater deputies. And when that happens..." "When that happens," Willa cut in, "they'll see what Claiborne made of." They left without chains, but with eyes on their backs. Half the town watched them ride out, some with fear, some with reverence. One boy, barely 12, whispered, "She's the one they say killed a man with his own knife." That night they camped near a dry creek, under stars so bright they looked like nails punched through black velvet. Willa sat sharpening her blade. Sam smoked in silence, the firelight catching the gray in his beard. "He'll come for us now," she said. "He already was. He'll bring more this time. I know." She turned to him. "Are you afraid?" "No, but I won't live to see you buried." She looked at him for a long time, then stood, crossed the space between them, and knelt by his side. "You won't have to." That night they didn't lie together for comfort. They didn't touch out of need. It was something deeper, more final, like two survivors marking the edge of peace before the war returned. A week later, Claiborne made his move. He didn't come alone. 20 men rode toward Holt Ridge just before dawn, horses armored, guns primed. Among them were mercenaries, ex-lawmen, and two brothers Willa remembered by face, not name, men who'd held her down while the fire ate the house she was born in. Briggs saw them first. He rode hard to the house, breath steaming in the cold. "They're here." Willa didn't hesitate. She strapped her rifle to her back and walked to the corral where her mare waited. Sam followed. Neither spoke of retreat. By the time Claiborne's riders crested the rise, the ranch was ready. Barbed wire had been wound tight across the lower road. The bunkhouse had been turned into a kill box. Willa had dug trenches herself, soaked with lamp oil. The first man to break the line lost his horse to a buried spike. The second took a shot to the throat. Then came the fire. She lit the trenches. Flames danced like devils across the ridge, turning snow to steam and night to blood. Sam took the roof. Willa the gate she didn't miss. 4 fell in the first volley, then 6. Claiborne's men scattered, unsure if the fight was worth the price. But he came through the smoke on a black stallion, rifle in one hand, bottle in the other. "Willa," he roared, "I ain't come for the land, I come for your bones." She stepped into the open, gun low. "I still got 'em," she called back. "Come take them." He laughed, a deep, broken sound. "You ain't that little girl anymore, are you?" She fired once. The bottle shattered in his hand. He came anyway. She let him get close enough to smell her, to see her face. And when he raised his gun, she drew first, not to kill. Not yet. She shot the horse from under him. He hit the ground hard, shoulder first, gun lost. Sam was there then, stepping out of the smoke with the shotgun. Claiborne spat blood. "You gonna let her finish it?" he snarled. "You gonna let that little bitch take your name through the dirt?" Sam said nothing, just looked at Willa. She walked to Claiborne, boots crunching on burned snow. He looked up at her, one eye swollen, breath wheezing. "I remember you now," he said. "You were crying, screaming, when we lit the barn." She knelt, pressed the barrel of her revolver to his heart. "I didn't scream," she said. "You did." And then she pulled the trigger. The rest fled. Word spread before sunrise. Willa Holt had killed Claiborne herself. No lawman raised a hand. No jury met. In the space of a night, the ridge became legend, and so did she. After Claiborne's death, the land held its breath. What followed wasn't peace, but a silence stitched with tension. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm, when the sky hasn't yet decided whether to break again or clear for good. Sam and Willa buried the bodies where the ground thawed quickest. They didn't mark the graves, didn't speak a prayer, just shoveled dirt and watched the blood vanish into soil that had already known so much of it. The last man to die had Willa's name carved into the handle of his knife. She tossed it into the fire that night and never mentioned it again. People stopped coming up the ridge, not lawmen, not drifters. Not even the old hands from neighboring ranches who used to visit for branding season or whiskey. Holt Ridge was holy now in the old sense, feared, not blessed, protected not by fences or borders, but by the memory of what had happened there. In Dalhart, they whispered about her with reverence and hate. Some called her the widow-maker, though she'd never taken a husband. Others called her Holt's war bride, though the two had never spoken vows. She wore no ring. But every time she walked beside Sam through town, the air changed. Doors closed faster, men nodded slower, and women glanced away. Willa didn't care. She didn't ride to town for their approval. She rode for salt, powder, or feed, and left before the gossip could breathe. She never forgot Garza County. Never stopped watching the edges of the map, in case some cousin or bastard child of the Claiborne name tried to rise. But months passed and nothing came. That winter a blizzard swallowed the ridge so deep the snow reached the windowsills. They were trapped inside for days, firewood dwindling, livestock dead or dying. Sam came down with a fever. She nursed him with old remedies, boiling willow bark and whiskey, wrapping his chest in wool soaked with bear fat. For 3 nights he drifted in and out of a darkness that frightened her more than gunfire. On the 4th night he woke to find her sitting beside him, rifle across her lap, half asleep but still upright. "You think I'm gonna leave you behind," he rasped. "You're too stubborn," she muttered. "I never asked what you wanted from me." She looked at him then, raw and tired. "I didn't want anything, not at first. And now. I want the land, the quiet, a place to keep my back to a wall." Sam nodded. "I can give you that," he said. "But it's all I've got. That's all I ever needed." He reached for her hand. She let him hold it. The next morning the wind broke. The ridge came back into view. By spring they rebuilt. What the fire hadn't taken, the snow nearly had. But Willa was made for ruin, and she worked as if trying to outpace it. They built a new barn, reinforced the fence lines. She broke a new colt, silver-coated and mean, and taught him to trust only her. Briggs died in his sleep around Easter. Willa buried him by the edge of the ridge, where the frost let her dig deep. She carved nothing into the wood, just placed his old pipe under the cross and whispered, "You stayed longer than anyone else." Sam stood beside her but didn't speak. After that, it was only the two of them and the land. One night Sam rode out early and didn't return by sundown. Willa waited, stoked the fire, checked the windows. At midnight, she saddled her horse and rode into the black. She found him on the north side, where the wind never stopped screaming. His horse had thrown a shoe and spooked near the ledge. Sam had hit hard, his leg bent wrong, blood crusted across his temple. He was still breathing. She tied a splint from fence posts, dragged him across her saddle, and rode back with both horses and his weight on her spine. When they reached the house, he was half conscious, whispering things she couldn't make out. "You're not dying," she told him, even as she carried him like a man already gone. He didn't die, but something changed after that. His strength never fully returned. He walked slower, slept more, took to staring out the window for hours. She tried to draw him out with talk, with books, even music, old records she found boxed in the attic, but his eyes stayed on the distance. "You've done what you came for," he said one morning. "You could leave now." "I didn't come for vengeance. I stayed for the rest." Sam nodded, but the light behind his eyes was dimming. They never spoke of marriage, never put words to what grew between them. But in the mornings, he touched her hand before she rose. And at night, she pulled the blanket over his chest before the fire went out. Then one summer morning, a rider came. A lawman, clean-shaven, riding a gray with government shoes. He brought papers, not a warrant. Not a threat, recognition. The state had ruled the killings at Holt Ridge acts of self-defense. There would be no trial, no bounty, no further pursuit. Sam had sent letters, one to a governor, another to a judge, and one to a newspaperman who still owed him. Willa didn't smile when she read the stamp, but she held it for a long time. "You're free," the lawman said. "Your name's clean." "No," she replied, "just quieter now." That fall, she found Sam on the porch, staring at the fire-red horizon. He looked thinner, but there was peace in his jaw. "Something happened?" she asked. "I heard coyotes this morning, hadn't heard them in weeks." She sat beside him. "That's good. Means the land, still moving, still healing." She said nothing. He reached into his coat and pulled out a silver ring, plain, shaped like a horseshoe, bent smooth. "It was my mother," he said. "Before she died, she said no woman ever took her name unless she could rope the wind." Willa turned the ring in her hand. "I've already got your name," she said, "but not the ring." "I don't need it." "I know, but I want you to have it." She slid it on. It fit. And for the first time since she arrived at that station, half dead and half vanished, Willa smiled without baring her teeth. The years following Claiborne's death didn't pass so much as grind by like wagon wheels over gravel, slow, hard, and full of dust. Holt Ridge settled into something almost ordinary. A place where grass returned stubbornly, where calves were born without gunshots in the distance, where the sound of a hammer meant repair instead of revenge. Willa took over most of the writing. Sam still managed the ledgers, slow but sharp, dictating by the hearth as she scribed in neat lines on yellowing paper. The ranch was smaller now, leaner, but it ran clean. They bred horses, a few head of cattle, sold hay to the nearby settlements when the rains came decent. Men still came sometimes, drifting up from places that didn't read the newspapers, looking for the girl with the iron spine. Hoping to make their name by breaking hers, they never left with breath in their lungs. In the spring of their 4th year, a young woman rode up the ridge on a chestnut Mustang. She was barely 20, with cheeks sunburnt and eyes hard from travel. "You Willa Holt?" she asked. Willa stepped out from the stable, dust on her sleeves, pistol heavy at her hip. "I am." "I'm Cassie. My father was Enoch Lang." Willa froze. That name was buried so deep it didn't echo anymore. "You're lying," she said flatly. "No, my mother was a saloon girl in Midland. She never told me much, just that he had another daughter. And that she watched him die." Cassie reached into her satchel and pulled a picture. It was old, creased, and grimed, but Willa recognized the face. Her father, younger, happier, and beside him the woman, pretty, hollow-eyed. The kind who never stayed in one place long. Willa took the photo, stared at it for a long time. "You come for the land." "I came for you," Cassie said. "I've got nothing else." They let her stay. Willa watched her closely. Studied her habits, the way she walked and handled a horse. Cassie wasn't a threat. She was green and she knew it, but she listened. She worked hard too, fence mending, water hauling, branding. When a rattler bit one of the colts, she knelt with it all night, sucking venom and pouring whiskey like she'd been born for grit. "I ain't weak," she told Willa once. "I've just never had a place to stand." "You do now," Willa replied. "But you'll have to defend it." Sam took to Cassie quicker than Willa expected. Maybe it was the youth, or the way she reminded him of Willa before the fire turned her iron. He taught her how to shoot better. He read to her from the Psalms when the nights got long. He told her stories Willa had never heard, about his first days riding cattle out to Kansas, about losing his first wife to fever. "He talks to her more than he ever talked to me," Willa told herself one night, standing on the porch, arms crossed tight. She wasn't jealous, just unsettled. She, grown used to being the only one who knew his silences. Now she had to share them. It was Cassie who saw the smoke. High, far east, just over the low ridges where Holt land faded into the brush. They rode out together, three abreast, Sam with his old shotgun, Cassie with her borrowed rifle, Willer in the lead. What they found wasn't a fire, it was a signal. Someone had set a shack ablaze and carved Holt's Hor Returns to the flames into the dirt outside. Cassie paled when she saw it. Who would? Willa didn't answer. She knelt. Touched the letters with her fingertips. The cuts were fresh, deep, done with something sharp and hateful. It was Claiborne's name behind it. It was someone newer. Someone who knew the old stories and wanted them reborn. They put the fire out. But the message stayed. Trouble returned that summer. A group of riders began trailing cattle from the west, cutting fences, setting traps on the outlying pastures. Small wounds at first, then bigger. They poisoned the well at the south line, shot two colts, left a rusted star nailed into the barn door. The sheriff in Dalhart sent no help, claimed it was too far, too uncertain. So Willer and Cassie rode out each night, waiting. Watching, they caught the first man by the old windmill. He was young, drunk, bold, spoke too much. Name, Jonah Wells, he said. Heard your legend. Figured if we made you bleed again, you run, or at least fall. Who's we? Willa asked. But he wouldn't say, so she beat it out of him, not out of rage, out of purpose. His words came like stones through broken teeth. A new family out east, calling themselves the Irons, mercenaries, ranch thieves. And one of them was married to a Claiborne widow. They want what Claiborne couldn't take, Jonah gasped. Want to plant their flag where yours stands. She left him half buried in a ravine. Let the coyotes finish. Sam didn't argue when she came back and told him. He just said, it's starting again. No, Willa said, it's finishing. She rode out the next morning. Alone, told Cassie to watch the ranch. Told Sam not to wait up. She tracked the Irons east through scorched hills, empty creeks, old mining trails. The land got crueler the deeper she went. Towns turned to ruins. Roads vanished. She found them camped in a gulch surrounded by high stone. 15 men, 2 women, one boy with a scar under his eye and a tattoo on his neck that matched the burned sea she remembered from Garza County. She watched all day. Memorized patterns, shift changes, the way the horses were tied. Then she lit the dynamite she'd brought, 2 charges to start a stampede, one for the canyon mouth. The blast echoed like thunder across the flats. Smoke rolled up in waves. By the time they realized what was happening, she was already inside the fire. She shot clean, moved faster than she ever had before. 5 down in the first minute, 3 more as they scattered. The woman with the Claiborne ring tried to beg. Willa didn't stop. She left the gulch with her coat torn and her bullets spent, but she wasn't touched. She returned to Holt Ridge on the 3rd night, horse limping, clothes blackened. Cassie met her at the gate. Did you get them? She asked. Willa nodded once. Cassie didn't ask for details. Sam stood on the porch, watching her come through the smoke. He looked old then, older than he ever had. You made it back, he said. I always do. He reached out. She took his hand. That night she sat at his feet while he read aloud. Her head rested against his knee. The fire cracked. The wind stayed quiet, and for the first time in years no one was coming. The autumn that followed was soft, as if the land itself had decided to forgive. Rain came steady. The grass grew thicker across the ridge, and for the first time since anyone could remember, the creek near the northern pasture ran full all the way through September. Birds returned, coyotes kept to the far hills. Cassie rode each day at dawn, circling the fence lines, learning the terrain like it was scripture. She carried a rifle but hadn't had cause to use it since the gulch. Willa let her go. Let her grow into the land without tightening the reins. She knew now what her own silence had once meant, that it wasn't distance, but protection. You watched the ones you loved from a distance so you could shoot what crept behind them. Sam walked with a cane. His bad leg never healed right after that fall, and the cold set in early, but he never asked for help. When Willa offered an arm, he waved it off with a grunt. "Still my land," he'd mutter, and she'd smile. "I know. I'm just here to borrow it." The big house stayed warm that winter. Cassie brought in extra wood each night without being asked. Sam spent long hours by the fire, reading the same books he'd read years before, but slower now, like he was savoring them for the last time. Willa took to sitting outside most evenings, wrapped in the coat he gave her that first night, the one that still smelled faintly of gunpowder and pine. She watched the tree line. Not for enemies, those were all gone, but for the memory of what had been. The girl at the station, the fire, the weight of a name she hadn't been born with but had earned. Sometimes she'd speak out loud to the wind. Things like, "I made it," or "It's mine now," or just the names of the dead. She wasn't haunted, not anymore, but she wasn't free either. Vengeance had a price, even after it was paid. Sam died in early spring. Not sudden, not dramatic. He woke, made coffee, sat by the window, and fell asleep in the chair with the sun on his face. Willa found him there. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Just knelt beside him, took his hand, and held it until it went cold. The funeral was small. Just Cassie, 3 ranchers from town who still had the spine to come, and the preacher from Eagle Fork who said nothing useless. Willa stood silent through the whole thing. Afterward, she walked up to the ridge alone and scattered Sam's ashes from the saddle of his old gelding. She didn't speak then, either, but the way she sat, straight-backed, silhouetted against the horizon, said everything that needed saying. She buried his cane under the porch. She left the chair by the window where it was. The next morning, she put on his hat. Years passed. Cassie took over the ledgers, hired help, ran the numbers clean. By 22, she had a rider's shoulders and a bookkeeper's eyes. She kept a photo of Enoch in the barn, beside a rusted spur she found in the gulch. Willa watched it all without stepping back. She was still the first one up, the last to bed, still rode the ridge every other day, but the war in her was quieter now, not gone, just resting, like a revolver kept loaded but oiled, untouched. Once a year she went to Dalhart. Bought whiskey, sat on the same bench where Sam had found her. The depot hadn't changed, the trains still howled. But no one looked at her now like she was a stray. They looked like they were trying not to stare. Sometimes she'd see girls stepping off the platform, lost, thin, holding too little, eyes like bruises. She never said anything. But she always left a coin and a wrapped biscuit on the bench before she walked away. The stories grew longer than the truth, they always do. Folks said she once shot a man through 2 walls, said she never slept indoors, said she could speak to ghosts. She never denied any of it. She just worked. The land loved her in the end, gave back what it could. Fruit trees she never planted, warm springs in places once dry. Even the horses came gentler to her hand. In her 40th year, Willa finally signed the land over to Cassie. She didn't leave, didn't vanish like some ghost hero in a dime novel. She stayed. But she stopped riding with a rifle, stopped checking her back trail. She started planting things, real things, tomatoes, beans, wildflowers, and 1 tree. Right where Sam used to sit. She planted it with her own hands and never said whose it was. When she died, it was quiet. No blood, no fire, just a breath drawn in and never given back. Cassie found her on the porch, hat tilted low, boots muddy from the garden. They buried her beside Sam. No stone, just the tree above her, taller now, reaching toward the ridge line like it remembered everything. People came that time. Not out of duty, but because they had to, ranchers, widows, sheriffs. A few women who'd once gotten off a train and found something waiting on a bench, a coat, a coin, a name. The preacher said nothing fancy, just. She came through fire and gave back land. That night the wind moved different across Holt Ridge, softer, like it was bowing.